The Wars of the Roses were a series of brutal civil wars in England, fought between the houses of Lancaster and York over control of the throne. Though many figures played pivotal roles during these conflicts, one of the most significant figures was Henry Tudor, later known as Henry VII. His ascent to the throne in 1485 marked the end of the dynastic conflict, but it also raised numerous questions about his legitimacy and the nature of his claim. A deeper exploration of Henry's lineage, his connection to the Beauforts, and the political and legal backdrop of his rise to power reveals that Henry VII's path to the throne was not one of straightforward succession, but rather a complex combination of usurpation, legal maneuvering, and opportunism. Henry VII's claim to the throne has often been misunderstood or oversimplified. Despite being a descendant of Edward III through his mother, Margaret Beaufort, Henry did not have a direct or legitimate hereditary claim to the throne. His maternal line descended from John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster, and his mistress Katherine Swynford, who later became his wife. However, the children born from this relationship were not considered legitimate according to the laws of the time, since John and Katherine were not married when they had their children. Though their later marriage was recognized by the Church, it did not change the fact that these children had been born outside of wedlock. In 1396, Richard II, the nephew of John of Gaunt, issued a royal decree that legitimized the children of John of Gaunt and Katherine Swynford, known as the Beauforts, a name which was derived from John of Gaunt's family estate in France. After the death of John of Gaunt in 1399, Richard II became increasingly paranoid and exiled his cousin, Henry Bolingbroke, the son of John of Gaunt and Blanche of Lancaster, stripping him of his inheritance. This sparked outrage, and Bolingbroke returned to England, with widespread support, forcing Richard to abdicate. Bolingbroke then ascended the throne as Henry IV. To solidify his rule, Henry IV had Parliament pass a decree in 1407 that barred descendants of illegitimate lines from claiming the throne. This act also aimed to protect the throne from challenges by other collateral branches of the Lancaster family, including the Beauforts, ensuring the stability of Henry IV's reign. Therefore, Henry VII, a descendant of the Beauforts, technically had no legal claim to the throne due to the 1407 Act of Parliament, which excluded the Beaufort line from succession. When Edward IV died in 1483, his sons Edward V and Richard, Duke of York, were to inherit the throne, with his brother Richard, Duke of Gloucester, who later became Richard III, as their protector. However, Richard seized power, declaring that Edward IV's marriage to Elizabeth Woodville was invalid, making their children illegitimate and strengthening his own claim. He convinced Parliament to pass the Titulus Regius, which declared Edward IV's children illegitimate and confirmed Richard's right to rule. By June 1483, Richard was crowned king, and the princes were imprisoned in the Tower of London, where they mysteriously disappeared, likely murdered. Richard's rapid rise and tyrannical actions, especially the disappearance of the princes, alienated many nobles. The Titulus Regius, which stripped the legitimacy of Edward IV's children, made Richard's claim seem legally manipulated, raising doubts among the nobility. As Richard's reign became increasingly unpopular, many nobles sought a stronger, more stable monarch, disregarding legalities in favor of political stability. Henry Tudor, though his claim was distant through Margaret Beaufort, a descendant of John of Gaunt, emerged as a challenger. The Beauforts were technically barred from the throne, but the nobility, disillusioned with Richard, overlooked this in favor of Henry's potential to restore order. Elizabeth Woodville, initially supportive of Richard, switched her allegiance after the prince's disappearance. She backed Henry to secure her daughter's futures and restore her family's power. Henry's claim was also supported by his connection to Henry VI through his father, Edmund Tudor, son of Owen Tudor, who later married Katherine of Valois, the widow of Henry V. All these events set the stage for the final showdown between Richard's and Henry's forces at the Battle of Bosworth. Although Henry Tudor was a descendant of John of Gaunt, he was not directly descended from the Lancasters, who fought in the Wars of the Roses. He only represented the Lancastrian cause, but was not a direct descendant of the family involved in the conflict. According to some historians, the Red Rose, associated with the Lancastrian cause, was not originally used by them during the wars. It was adopted by Henry VII after his victory at Bosworth, as part of Tudor propaganda. Henry created the Tudor Rose, combining the red and white roses, symbolizing the union of the Lancastrians and Yorkists and marking the end of the conflict, ushering in an era of peace under the Tudor dynasty. Additionally, Henry Tudor did not initially have his own distinct coat of arms, and his Tudor lineage, based on his Welsh descent, lacked the heraldic status of the established Lancasters and Yorks. However, after his victory and marriage to Elizabeth of York, he solidified his rule with the Tudor Rose, symbolizing the merging of the two houses and the end of the Civil War. The Battle of Bosworth in 1485, often seen as the decisive moment that led to Richard III's defeat and the conclusion of the Wars of the Roses, is traditionally viewed as a victory for a Henry Tudor. However, this view tends to overlook the significant role of betrayal in securing Henry's success. Despite having a smaller force than Richard's, Henry's army was strengthened by defections from Richard's own supporters, particularly key figures like the Stanley family. In this light, the battle was more about political alliances and the betrayal of Richard by those close to him than it was about sheer military strength. Moreover, historians have questioned Henry VII's personal involvement in the battle. It is widely thought that his survival was unlikely given the circumstances, and some suggest he may not have been directly involved in the fighting. Other historians contend that John de Vere, Earl of Oxford, played a more decisive role in securing the victory. These perspectives challenge the traditional narrative of Henry's central role in the battle, highlighting the political machinations that were a defining feature of his ascent to power. Some historians believe that Henry VII's own claim to the throne was based on usurpation, rather than legitimate succession. His marriage to Elizabeth of York, daughter of King Edward IV, was a political move aimed at consolidating his power, rather than uniting two houses with a legitimate claim. This union did not change the fact that Henry's ascension was based more on political maneuvering than on divine right or legal inheritance. Elizabeth's claim to the throne, despite being a direct descendant of Edward IV, was legally complicated. The Titulus Regius, a document that declared Richard III's reign legitimate, had also declared Edward IV's children illegitimate. This decree was later nullified by Parliament a few months after the Battle of Bosworth. Due to the fragility of Henry VII's claim to the throne, both he and his son, Henry VIII, took drastic steps to cement their control. One such measure was the execution of numerous Yorkist heirs to eliminate any potential rivals to the Tudor dynasty. These actions reflected Henry's deep insecurity about the legitimacy of his reign. To secure their thrones, both Henry VII and Henry VIII executed key Yorkists. In 1499, Henry VII executed Edward Plantagenet, Earl of Warwick, a direct descendant of Edward IV and Richard III, who posed a threat to his rule. Edward was accused of plotting to escape the Tower of London, although the charges were likely fabricated. Later, in 1541, Henry VIII executed Margaret Pole, Countess of Salisbury, who was the daughter of George, Duke of Clarence, and niece to both Edward IV and Richard III. Although initially loyal to Henry, she became a threat due to her opposition to his split with Rome. Despite her diminished political power, at the age of 68, Margaret was executed on charges of treason. Despite questions surrounding the legitimacy of Henry VII's claim to the throne, his reign marked the beginning of the Tudor dynasty, which lasted for over a century. Henry's victory at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485 ended the Wars of the Roses and established the Tudor family as the ruling power in England. The Tudor dynasty, which spanned from 1485 to 1603, ushered in significant changes, including Henry VIII's break with the Roman Catholic Church in the 1530s, a move that reshaped the religious and political landscape of England. The dynasty's legacy also includes the reigns of Edward VI, Mary I, and Elizabeth I. Edward VI, the young son of Henry VIII, presided over further Protestant reforms. Mary I, his sister, famously attempted to restore Catholicism, earning her the nickname Bloody Mary due to her persecution of Protestants. However, it was Elizabeth I, whose leadership is often associated with England's Golden Age, who cemented the Tudor legacy. Her reign was marked by cultural flourishing, maritime exploration, and military victories, such as the defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588. Thus, the Tudor dynasty not only ended the medieval period, but also laid the foundations for England's transformation into a more centralized, powerful nation. A huge shout out to Marmo, whose exceptional research and dedication played a crucial role in bringing this video to life. Your hard work and insights truly made a difference. Dankeschön. Thanks for watching. Please share your thoughts in the comments section, like the video, and subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned for more.